Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We are grateful to have Giovani and Jill here with us to continue our conversation about the words and the background stories about safety and safety surrounding leisure and sports activities. Let's start this episode by chatting about infrastructure. If we divide things up and look at rural communities, suburban communities, and urban communities, how does each of those help support safety and leisure in sports the same, and how do they do it differently? Whoever wants to grab that question, just go with it.
So I am thinking about this question. I think that it's so important, right, to consider my point earlier in terms of access and privilege. I taught a race, gender, and leisure course last academic year, and it was fascinating because I think about 60% of the students in my class were African American, and to hear the stories of their experiences growing up in terms of even things as simple as play and what their experiences were when they were young and they would go outside to play or not be allowed to go outside to play, right? So those experiences when we're young really shape some of our experiences, obviously, when we're older then as well. I realize I'm kind of getting off topic here, but I think when we think about rural, suburban, and urban, we can look at what was happening at age, let's say 5 to 12, in terms of what type of outdoor play was happening and under what conditions. And there is a really different level of safety just in the natural environments in those situations.
Yeah. And Giovani, you mentioned a little bit about your training. I wonder, different rural areas of California, suburban, urban, how do these things, how are they the same and different when it comes to training?
Well, as far as training, we do training throughout California. So yes, I'm Los Angeles based, but we do training throughout California. And throughout my travels with California, I do know that there are disparities in which we do see there's like a training vacuum sometimes, especially in the lower socioeconomic communities. Take, for instance, when we do training, I am multicultural and I do training in English and Spanish. And sometimes when we do training in Spanish, we do see a difference in how when we train those, they're not used to formal training, those in Spanish. So we actually have to teach a little bit harder, a little bit more to reach those communities. From anything, I've taught from any students in Bakersfield and the farming communities, all the way down to, of course, training in a hotel in Beverly Hills. So there is definitely differences in how we train those communities. And not only differences, but we try to envelop those lower socioeconomic communities too. Now, there is one thing that I do notice that as far as the professional play sport side of things, when I'm doing play at high schools or where I'm covering a game in a high school, there is a difference on how, and what I see is like, sometimes it's just me on the sideline from my high school. But when we go to Beverly Hills, then we have a doctor on the sideline, we have an EMT and an athletic trainer. So there's a lot of differences in high school play. And unfortunately, some of the lower economic high schools, they don't have a whole healthcare team, as it's just me sometimes. So there is a difference between high schools that we see, especially urban versus more affluent communities.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good thing. You're probably very excellent at your field, and they're very lucky to have you. So let's talk about some of the programs or some of the communities where you all have integrated some of the leisure sports or the safety activities into routines for residents who would like to participate in a success story. So Jill, you've been doing this for a long time. give us a success story on some of the things you've integrated.
Sure. In thinking about this question, I was thinking just on a really large scale, I think the Boys and Girls Club is one of the best examples of integrating programs, right? They've got it all. They've got sports and recreation. They've got mental health. They've got help with homework, computer access, right? So large scale, I think that's one of the biggest success stories. I teach a programming and event planning course, and it's a service learning course. So the students actually develop a program or an event for a community agency. And when I was in Bloomington, Indiana, that was my first experience with the Boys and Girls Club. And I had a group of students that developed it was like their little awards night, and they came up with, different events for all of the participants. But, I think it's kind of been a theme in our conversation tonight for me, especially, but I just getting opportunities for participation in sports and recreation to kids that don't have the means to do it or the way access, right? I think the average household income for the students that were in this particular program was like $13,000. And so the parent or whoever is working just to essentially pay the bills. And there's, anyway, a long way of saying that I just think they do amazing things for kids who don't have opportunities to participate. And so
I'm excited to hear that, actually, because I know we have a robust Boys and Girls Club here in Greenville, the main city around where Amy and I live. Yeah, so it's just good to hear that it's really valuable,
Yes.
And replicable, that you're actually able to use this in a course to help students learn how to plan those events. I love that. That's sustainability. That's fantastic. How about you, Giovani? What's a success story you have with some of your work?
I would have to agree with Jill on that. The Boys and Girls Club, they do an awesome job of getting programs out there, education programs. We are one of the instructors and we teach all the Boys and Girls Clubs in Los Angeles County. So we do a lot of training with them too. So they do some good work. So does YMCA. I'm a former board member with one of the YMCAs out here. And when I was doing that as a board member, we encourage, again, programs there, prevention, education programs, again, such as CPR and first aid. So I'd say both of those would be two good programs or activities.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's talk about training and education. How do you teach people how to be safe? What's a strategy that you would advise to use to help people prevent accidents?
Well, I guess I could start with this one. Again, we teach a lot of courses, and most of those courses involve prevention, the preventing of the injury from occurring. Part of that is encouraging people, again, doing that risk assessment, doing scene safety, understanding that to be prepared, and if in case something does happen. I think training is a huge important component. And not only that, but if you're going to have your kids in or you yourself are going to be doing any activity, train yourself in that activity too. Know a little bit about what the activity you're going to be doing. Just don't, get in that weekend warrior aspect of thing and just, dive right into it without being prepared for it first.
Oh, that's good. What do you think, Jill?
Ditto. I think education, preparation, appropriate gear, stretching before and after, and again, yes, echoing what Giovani said, being as preventative as possible in terms of preparing for potential injury. And as we age, it seems to get harder and harder, right? to prepare for those things.
All right, we're stepping right into the next question. Thank you, Jill. For some people who age, not all of us who age, but for some people who age, what are some of the benefits and cautions that need to be factored into safe sports and leisure activities? And I love what you mentioned before, Jill, about knowing who is with you to participate. That is really, really important. But what are some things that you would say are benefits and things that we need to think about? Jill, I'll start with you first.
I think one of the things that we need to think about, and it can never happen too young, but I don't think it happens for a lot of us until much later in life, but is to think about lifelong leisure activities and sport, right? Oftentimes because think about what the youth sports are: basketball, soccer, football. These are not necessarily things that we can sustain for life as we get into our, probably 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and as we think about wear and tear on our joints, right? So, however, some of those lifelong leisure activities that we might think about, which are things maybe like golf or tennis, those things are not just things that you go out and do for the first time when you're 55 years old most of the time, right? Or you have to have the means to be able to do them, right? Those are more privileged activities, right? So thinking about lifelong leisure activities, and even as parents, as we think about exposing our children to these things like hiking and camping and, kayaking, canoeing, dependent, right? Geographic location and access to some of those things is really necessary. But I think as parents, it's our job, hopefully, to expose our children to some of these things that they can then continue to do as adults and kind of get them to think about that. I know I didn't think about those types of things until it was time to do them, right?
Right. Okay.
So,
what about you, Giovani? What are some benefits and cautions for some of the older situations that you run into?
Well, I agree with what Jill was saying, as far as, especially as we age, but I'm going to take a different aspect of it. There's also aspects of healthy living that we can actually attribute to that, encouraging people to actively play and get out there. Meaning, what we do now when we teach a CPR and first aid class with the American Heart Association, we actually encourage people to, again, stop smoking, reduce your stress, because all those things, reducing stress, high blood pressure, can also lead to a healthier living, which would encourage you to actually get out there and do some leisure play and hopefully preventing injuries that we see. I mean, just lowering your blood pressure and lowering your cholesterol levels, they can actually help a lot of the things that we see. And sometimes even that may be in the impact of losing some weight when we do, because if you do lose some weight when you do activities, it can actually reduce injuries that we may see, either stress fractures or fractures, even just from a minor incident on a playground. So as we get older, some of those things to think about, a better style of healthy living to prevent those injuries altogether.
Excellent. These are great points. So all of our listeners need to start thinking about lifelong leisure activities and being heart healthy too, which probably help each other.
I thought of one other benefit.
Do share.
That we haven't really mentioned. And that is this idea of family leisure and also this benefit of socialization and feeling part of a community or just kind of a sense of community, especially as folks age. One of the other success stories that I was thinking about, they occur in long-term care facilities, right? The activities that happen for folks that live there and what that creates for folks, right? So friendships, relationships, socialization, what starts off as maybe a game of cards can oftentimes result in making a new friend and feeling less isolated.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jill, because that is absolutely so important. We love that.
Yeah, Amy and I've done a few episodes on issues related to aging. I don't know why we're so interested in that topic, but it seems like we are. And
I don't know, Holland. It's not relevant to us at this point.
It's led me to do a little more reading and listening to lectures on YouTube and things about aging. And I know there was one study that I was listening to on YouTube at the University of California, Irvine, that showed that for every hour that people spent outside their homes doing something in midlife, they lived longer. I mean, it's phenomenal what impact just activity and being active has on our health spans and our lifespans.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared all that. Well, we have one more question before you go. What is a metaphor to help us understand safety in sports and leisure activities? And whoever wants to jump on that first, just go right ahead.
Jill, I'll let you go.
Metaphor for understanding safety in sports and leisure. I need to think about this for a second. Giovani,
that's okay. You can think, Jill. This is a little toughy, but sometimes people can think in pictures better. And so when you all give us these little word pictures, it helps us put this topic in our brains a little bit.
Well, from my aspect, I guess you could say every time I'm teaching a class, let's say the CPR and first aid class, we talk about being trained and prepared because the life that you may save may be that family member, maybe that loved one. So some of the things that we do in preparation, again, I keep stretching preparation, that preparation would encourage people not to get so many or not to see so many injuries out there in the field, whether they're at leisure play or not. So I hope that with anything, just being prepared for those emergencies would definitely help.
Okay.
Thanks, Giovani. That was great. I think in terms of a metaphor for safety in leisure.
And you can expand it. It doesn't have, because I know your world isn't always about safety. Maybe just leisure activities. Like,
sure.
What's it for?
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of leisure, it's really limitless for all of us.
I love that. It can be if we have access, right?
Mm-hmm. And if we have access, and if we all, the people who do have access, are intentional about finding ways to reach folks who may not have it.
Beautiful.
Wow. Well, is there anything else anyone wants to add here at the very end of our conversation? Or do you think we covered it all?
I think we did a pretty good job. I am really thankful to be a part of the conversation.
Well, we're thankful for having you. So tell us where folks can learn more about your work or connect with you.
Sure. So the easiest way to connect with me directly would be via email, and that's jsturts@vwu.edu. Okay.
And Giovani, how can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
Well, I think the same thing. They can either visit our website, AmericanFirstResponder.com, or Giovani at AmericanFirstResponder.com. Via email, that is.
All right. Well, that's easy. We can be in touch with you by email. And I want to say how much we appreciate you joining us for this conversation. It took some unexpected turns, but I really liked it. I really learned a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And folks who are listening to us, you can join us next week or the next episode for a conversation centered around safety in the military.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you again, Jill and Giovani. This has been wonderful. To our listeners, we ask that you please leave us a review, rate us on wherever you get your podcasts, especially on Apple Podcasts, and become a subscriber to the AfterwordPodcast.com because it does help us keep the conversations going. And remember, you are always welcome at our table.